taxation for the self-employed, firm-level agreements over the sectoral level, reduction of minimum wages, no restricted professions, which is one commitment we haven't implemented yet, reduction of domestic investment, crisis levy in firms, and reduction of heavy and arduous profession. And these are just the categories that I chose to show in the presentation. The Greek business environment after the MOUs didn't exist. It was desolated. So, the conclusion. First of all, the political climate, uncertain. No one really knew what was happening. It still is, by the way. Who's going to come and invest in a country that no one knows what's going to happen? And I'm not saying, you know, the argument that, oh, who's going to come and invest in a country that has a left government or a right government? It doesn't matter. Just commit to a single solution and be done with it. This going back and forth has, the entire country for 5 years has reached a stalemate. Nothing is moving, nothing. It's just outside negotiations with partners. And this legislation passes and things have changed and no one really knows what to do. So that's one, policy drift. Another, 3 governments from 2008-9 until now, none of them kept to their electoral commitments, including this one, right? None of them. Temporal aspect. The legislation passed was not given enough time for deliberation. Okay, no deliberation, no social partners inclusion. No inclusion, how are you going to implement the measures? These measures were decided, were brought to Parliament for 2 days. No one read them because it was each bill was 500 pages long, and no one really had any input on that. So I said, okay, so sectoral level agreements, we're done with that. We'll do firm level agreements. Fine, did you consult with anyone? How are you going to implement the measure? No one knew. That's why people went on the streets time and again, time and again. The magnitude of the austerity implemented was tremendous. I mean, if you read the memorandums, every single policy aspect of the Greek state is mandated to be changed within these documents. Every one. I mean, from healthcare to education. And the reforms were in depth. They fundamentally changed the way the Greek state worked. And there was also lack of consideration. I mean, these reforms were not very well accommodated to the Greek status quo, okay? I mean, this is a country which has a strong social democracy tradition, so it's very difficult to implement such hard austerity. So in short, the business sector, dead. Uncertainty, fundamental changes, constant changes, changes that were not fitted for businesses in this country, death. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it's lovely to see enthusiasm on this issue, which is quite frustrating. And we can see that you've done a lot of hard work on the documents and the changes and the different implementing acts and how they or have not had an impact on the business environment. So I'd like to open up the floor to any questions or points for our third talk.
I did my job very well.
Thank you for a very interesting presentation. Listening to you, it shows clearly in this case, as we see in so many other cases, that political measures, policy measures, legislation, everything is adopted and put into place very quickly as a reaction. It's reactionary and it's not well thought through. We spoke earlier today about environmental impact assessments, and if we return to that session and the idea of there being some broader overarching aims for what we are meant to be doing, could a possible solution to stop this spiral downwards into more and more crisis through more and more measures be having some kind of requirement for broader impact assessments before such drastic measures are allowed to be put into place?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, consultation and deliberation with the social partners would be a start. I mean, it's not that the measures are bad. Everyone's saying that. No. It's just that the measures were not really well suited for this country. And even if they were as benign as their authors claim to be, they didn't have the necessary impact. I mean, let's face it, those are intensely neoliberal measures, and they're supposed to enhance growth and much more strengthen the business sector. But they didn't have any impact on that exactly because there was no consultation. There was no, policy implementation was just so abrupt and so rough that social partners did not have time to contribute. Now in Greece, I'll give you that, in Greece, contributions by social partners such as unions, etc., tend to be more or less ambiguous. Even so, even in this case, it still is a necessary requirement. Otherwise, policy is almost impossible to be implemented and to be owned. A lot of people say that the problem with the Greek program was ownership, and it's impossible to own something that you cannot implement. If there was a little bit of negotiation, a little bit of social partner inclusion, like a reduction of like 10%, 15% of what is said there, the results would be tremendously different, I suppose. Maybe not, but it would stand a better chance at least.
Thank you for that very good answer. But I'd like to take you even one step back, because I agree with you absolutely that it's important with social dialogue. But if your stance seems to be that it doesn't matter which government or which measures, as long as you keep on. Now I'm being a bit provocative on purpose to get even more out of you. That as long as you keep on one path, and as long as you have social engagement, consultation about the measures that you're doing, then it will be fine. But my point was to go even one more step back, and you mentioned yourself that these are neoliberal measures. I'm not so concerned with the label that we put on them, but more about the content, because a lot of the legislative and other policy measures that are undertaken in Europe are based on postulates derived from economic theory. Not economic theory, which is based on models, and there are conclusions based on certain assumptions, but postulates that policymakers think they know what they're doing, but they don't. And if we had some kind of impact assessment of what would this measure mean in this country at this time, then perhaps we would have a better basis for social dialogue about these issues. Before.
Before the implementation, an impact assessment. Well, they claim to have had them, I'll be honest with you. Although the IMF did come out and say, the famous, that they underestimated, what's the name? I forget, but anyway, what? Excuse me? Multipliers, fiscal multipliers, okay? So they underestimated them. So they underestimated how their measures would impact their economy. So I understand what you're saying, yes. Given that it's been 5 years, I'd even be inclined to say just have an impact assessment after the implementation. Beforehand, you might raise the argument that they had impact assessments, but they were wrong. And talking about future events might be tricky. But that's fine. They could have done it at 11, 12, 13, 14. So yes, some impact assessment. Yes, even better if they could have them beforehand. Even better if they considered at what kind of socio-political and economic status quo they're implementing these measures. So measure more accurately the impact it would have. Definitely, yeah, that would help a lot.
Any other points? Maybe
Perhaps I was too aggressive.
No, it was. I think you depict very well the frustration that the Greek people face when discussing these political issues and how fast the changes occur. And we have this expression which is linked to the financial crisis and the responses, which is that of regulatory fatigue. And I think if one can see that, it's most evident in Greece. Linking to the last comment made on impact, I think one of the positive things the UK has, which I've observed, is that they have a public consultation process before different actual measures are adopted. And that means that firms, businesses, individuals, academics can actually provide a response on what they think about this measure, not from a political perspective, rather one that's based on evidence or studies or research or how they estimate that would affect their business, if they're from the area of business. So linking that to all the kind of measures that you've outlined, and the speed with which these were adopted, do you think that it's also a matter of process? So we're not only looking at what measures are adopted, how fast they're adopted, but how they're adopted. So is it also a matter of process? Should we maybe take a better look in Greece whether there's a different way of adopting measures? Who should contribute? How should they contribute? Should the deadlines be more flexible, more open, so we do get the engagement that we want, and perhaps have a better idea in this sense of what measures are actually being taken outside the agreements and the treaties? So yes, I'd like your comment on the process.
Yeah, I think the process, I mean, I'm not an institutionalist per se, but I do think the process is really important. I mean, I am a democratic theorist, if you want to put a label on it, so the process is incremental in the measures. But I mean, I see where you're going with the UK system. Yes, different country, island, I'm sorry. Yes, the UK has a very different tradition, and they did go through, actually the UK was the first Western developed nation to borrow from the IMF, although no one knows, I don't know if the amount is known, but no one knows what reforms they asked in return. That was in the 70s. Yes, procedures matter a lot, and it's not that we don't have them in place. I mean, all things equal, Greek procedural regulations and Greek procedural processes and whatever, what have you, they are very good. And Greek legislation was also, before crisis, very good. I mean, we do suffer a lot on the implementation part, but it's just that they weren't followed, or they weren't given enough time. So yes, I would extend your criticism to the Greece, the rest of the Eurozone member states, because people say, you know, Portugal is out, Spain is out, you know, it's just Greece left in. They're not really out. These countries are in post-program surveillance, which means until they've repaid 75% at least of their loans, and those are substantial loans, they have the exact same review missions from the Troika that we have. So it's not really, you know, that different. So I think we have to step back overall from the Eurozone crisis and the EU and say, well, look, okay, maybe it wasn't designed to succeed. Maybe it was systemic for it to fail, but the procedure that these measures were adopted was democratically questionable, and in terms of effectiveness, not that good, because you have to measure effectiveness not by time, so by how much time it took to decide it. No, that was very quick, but by the effectiveness of implementation, how well people accepted these measures. Some better than others. That's fine. Maybe at a national level, the Irish or the Spanish or the Portuguese had better processes. Or maybe their people weren't as revolutionary in character as we are, or they weren't so disinclined to follow everything. That's fine. But my point is, comparative politics aside, you should take a look at where you're going to implement the measures first before you actually implement. There is no law in saying that, hey, look, this country is a little bit different, so it might need a little bit of a different program. Not a lot, just a little. If you go into the measures themselves, that's another issue. But yes, procedures matter a lot, for me at least.
Great. So thank you very much. If I can make some short key words for the presentation. So legal certainty matters, political certainty matters, and vision matters. So thank you very much to all of you for your presentations. And now we're half an hour behind, but we can still manage that. We have lunch, and it's at Electra Palace, which I'm hoping most of you know where that is. In the booklet, yes, in the booklet, and the last page, you have a map indicating where it is. It's very nearby, so we'll all go together, but just in case somebody is left behind, we'll have lunch from 1:30 to 2:30. Okay? Thank you.